Hello, everybody, and welcome to Bright Founders Talk at TEMI. TEMI is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. Welcome to our podcast, where we bring you the most inspiring stories of entrepreneurs and experts in the software development industry. Each week, we interview successful leaders who share their unique journeys and valuable insights. I'm your host, Barry, and today we're lucky enough to be joined by a remarkable guest, Frédéric Rivain, who is CTO at Dashlane. Hello, Frédéric. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm actually preparing a security summit for Dashlane on April 1st, and I was just talking to one of our potential speakers right before that podcast. So that was a good segue into our conversation.
So it never stops for you, does it? Some people are just so busy, there's no rest. So maybe people don't know who you are. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and the company that you work at?
Sure. As you can tell, I'm French from the accent, so I apologize if it's sometimes a bit rough on the edges. I'm actually based in New York right now. I've been at Dashlane for 9 years. Started out in the Paris office and then moved to New York 3 years ago. Before that, just to give you a brief overview of my career, I've been in online gambling. I worked for BetClick for a while. I've been the CTO of an e-commerce startup that didn't work out. That's always an interesting experience. I've been in video gaming, doing casual games back in the early days of mobile gaming and the early days of web games, and started at IBM. I was very lucky to have a scholarship from IBM for my studies, so that's how I started there.
Was that something that you've always been interested in, technology? 'Cause you had quite an eclectic career, haven't you? So what drove you into those particular fields?
Yeah, surprisingly, I did an engineering school in France that was very generalist. So we did from mechanics to chemistry to a lot of everything, and not specifically computer science. I ended up doing like my specialization in computer science. That's how I went to Cambridge and had a scholarship from IBM. But I did like video games. I did like actually also video editing. Which has been a passion of mine, and so that's how I got into computer science in general and the tech world more generally. I mean, at the end of the day, today, there's so much that relies on technology. It's such a great career, so I encourage everybody to look into it.
So you mentioned one of your careers wasn't as successful as you hoped it would be. What skills did you bring from that? I won't say failure, but the way that it hasn't gone into your current role. How do you apply and learn from it?
Yeah, that one was very specific because it didn't really fail because the let's say the startup failed on itself. We were incubated by a larger e-commerce organization in France, and that larger company decided to kill the incubator. So we disappeared along with the incubator, which was a bit of a pity because we were doing good and there were interesting things happening, and but that means that you don't have control on everything. Of course, you need to just adapt and react, and that's all you can do.
So just talk a little bit about what tech trends are like currently catching your attention within your industry, and like what are the driving factors behind their significance?
Yeah, so Dashlane is a password manager. So of course, I'm very much focused on cybersecurity, very much focused on password management, on identity in the digital world, and there's a lot happening in that industry. So it's very interesting to be at that like inflection point where okay, we're trying to get rid of the passwords, and even though we are a password manager, we're trying to be a passwordless manager to some extent. There's a new format called passkeys that has been created by a big consortium of all the key players in the industry called the FIDO Alliance. We are on the board of the FIDO Alliance. We're doing a lot of lobbying, a lot of work with our partners in here. And so it's very interesting to see how the transition is happening, both from a technology standpoint, but also from market awareness. How do you educate the market? How do you encourage and support the organization to transition to that new format? And we all want the same thing. We want to get rid of those massive risks that are phishing attacks. And by the way, you can see what's been happening recently with AI. AI has been at the heart of a lot of more sophisticated phishing attacks at scale. You can now customize, do deep fakes, and do a lot of crazy stuff to attack and steal data from the end users. So,
do you always feel like you're kind of playing catch up because the speed of the advancement within AI and the sophistication of the way of like accessing people's accounts? Do you feel like doesn't matter how fast you move, you're always like one step behind or just one step ahead?
Well, in the world of cybersecurity, it's anyway always a game of cat and mouse. You're always trying to postpone the moment you will be breached or the moment you will have a security incident, and everything you can do is actually try to make it as hard as possible for the attackers to attack you. So hopefully they will look somewhere else, and then try to make sure that if it happens, you have the right measures in place to react the right way, to communicate the right way to your customers, to make sure that you mitigate as much as possible the risks. But it's always I mean, there's no 100% perfection in that world for sure, and so you're always trying to keep raising the bar so that you keep as strong as possible.
So in relation to AI, so I know that the sophistication of the attacks is becoming more and more prolific. How does your company use AI? Or if it does, how does it use it just to enhance like digital identity protection?
Yeah, so we do use AI. I mean, AI is a big umbrella word with a lot of things behind it. Sometimes when people talk about AI today, they think about LLM and Gen AI and that type of stuff. So we actually use both machine learning to power what we call our autofill engine. That's the component which, when you are in the browser, will identify the forms and the fields and make sure that you provide the right information in the right field. And it's a very complex challenge to do. And so we're using both machine learning, like traditional machine learning on the front end, but also Gen AI LLMs to actually help us tag and label datasets that are used to train the ML models. So it's a bit of a whole loop of AI. And we're actually working also on AI models for anti-phishing. Because at the end of the day, the Dashlane extension in the browser is also able to identify a website that could be a phishing website, and that's why also we're using AI to power this.
So when I was looking through your LinkedIn profile, I noticed one of your comments was in relation to like a beta project or a beta phase. Is that still ongoing? And if it is, can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Oh, I recently shared about the cloud passkeys. Is that what
That's
you're
right.
referring to?
Yeah.
Yeah, so in the world of passkeys are still a pretty new technology. So essentially, what trying to do, they're trying to replace passwords with a cryptographic pair of keys. So you have a public key, a private key. You're doing that exchange of cryptographic key with the website you want to log in, and that's enough for you to be authenticated and get into there. The problem is that you need to store the secret, the private key, somewhere. So either you can store it on your device, on your phone, and so on. But if you want to synchronize that secret across multiple devices, then that becomes complicated. And what we're doing right now with Cloud Passkeys is we're storing that private key, that secret, in what's called a cloud secure enclave. And sorry, I'm getting a bit technical here, but
It's good. It's interesting.
yeah. So essentially, what device manufacturers have done is in the hardware, in the CPU of your device, you have a sandbox, a small protected area where you can store your biometrics or like the secret part that's required for you to operate the device. That concept of a secure enclave has been put in the cloud by the cloud providers. So AWS, Google Cloud, Azure now offer services to have the same concept of hardware, protected hardware that you can put stuff in there, but nobody can access it. We can't access it as a provider. The cloud provider can't access it. So we're using that concept to put the secret, the private key of the passkey in there, which makes it very secure because it's not on the device anymore. It can be, if you have a keylogger or malware, it cannot be stolen from the device. And it also gives us the opportunity to do very interesting stuff around sharing of passkeys. Then you can control how you share the passkeys without giving away the secret of the passkey, that type of stuff. And it's pretty new, it's pretty innovative, so that's why it's in beta right now, because we want to make sure that we do it right, and we are looking forward to the feedback from our beta customers to tell us if things are working fine.
It's really interesting when you mentioned feedback, because I suppose when you're talking to like different groups of people, do you ever have a situation where a customer or a client may think that actually this is the most important thing, but actually behind the scenes, you know that that isn't a big issue and it's actually something else? Do you ever have those kind of situations?
all the time. All the time, in the sense that, especially in a world like password management or identity management in general, people tend to rely on very old practices that are actually not the right practices. So there's a lot of education we need to do to tell them, actually, you don't care about rotating passwords on a regular basis. That's not what you should do. What you should do is use a password manager so that the password is long enough, complex enough, and unique on that website so that you don't have to rotate it. Because if you want to rotate it, it means that you need to ask your employee, your end user, to actually think about the new password and create a probably weak password because they don't want to remember a new password. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen in that world to explain, okay, what are the best practices? What are we seeing in general from all our customers that we're learning from the customers? And we can, of course, share those lessons with everybody so that everybody gets better and raises the bar in their own field.
So I know some people who just use the same password for whatever it is, because I've got like 40 different accounts and there's no way that I'm going to be able to remember all of them. And some people do use the same accounts, the same passwords again and again and again. Are you surprised by I shouldn't say like the lack of savviness or irresponsibility, depending on your perspective, that people just continue to do that, even the world being what it is.
I'm not surprised. I mean, I often use different metaphors to try and explain that. It's like a dentist and the toothbrush. We can tell you should brush your teeth every day and you should floss and do all the good things. But then people are a bit lazy and they might still not do it. And then you'll get cavities and you'll get issues. Or a more extreme metaphor is the metaphor about climate change. We all know we're going to the wall with climate change, and still we're not doing much. Like we're not acting enough. So it's a bit of the same thing with digital hygiene. Like you know it's wrong to use the same password everywhere. You know there are breaches out there. Are you taking action? Maybe not. The sad thing for me is that there are tools out there. It's not that complicated. And by the way, if you use a password management, besides the security aspect of it, it's so comfortable, so convenient. You're online. You don't even have to remember to autofill your password. The password manager will autofill on your behalf. So it's even you get the convenience along with the security. So
my next question is, and I was thinking in my head, how do I do this question? Because it's going to make me look very smart or very dumb, depending on how it's received. So I was speaking to someone recently about quantum computing, and they say that they said 10 years. I don't know where the figure for 10 years comes from, but they said it's going to revolutionize password protection. What's your thoughts on it? And do you agree that it's going to change the playing field completely?
yeah, definitely. And we've been actually doing a lot of R&D around post-quantum cryptography because the day quantum computers are powerful enough, they're essentially going to be able to break the fundamental primitives of cryptography that we use today on the internet, RSA and the likes. So we need to get ready for the future of that world, which means we need to reinvent or invent new algorithms that are going to be resistant to those quantum computers. Those algorithms exist already. We don't know if they are the ones that will be used in the long term, but the NIST in the US has had a competition to try and find out what the new algorithm should be. They actually completed that competition after many years in the summer 24. So now we have like a standard algorithms that are going to be standardized that we should use for post-quantum cryptography. Now, are we close or not close to the moment where those quantum computers are going to be powerful enough? Nobody knows. We can see that Google and Microsoft and IBM and all the big techs are getting better and better, but we're still far away from that moment. Everyone can take a bet on when it's going to happen. I think when it happens, it's actually going to be too late. We're going to be facing kind of the same moment as the year 2K moment, where everybody freaked out too late. It's kind of the same with the Q day, as it's being called by journalists. When it happens, it will be too late. So we need to get ready ahead of it. And we also need to get ready ahead of it because we know that one thing that is already happening is that malicious actors, whether it's state nations or criminal networks and so on, are already harvesting data. Not because they can hack the data today, brute force the data today, but because in a few years, they will be able to. So there's that attack, which is called a harvest now, decrypt later, which is very sensitive to that quantum story. So you should already be looking at what you use in terms of cryptography and think about, okay, how are you protected for the future? Of course, then it depends on your context. It depends on the sensitivity of your data and so on. But I mean, we're a password manager. We protect very important stuff for our customers. So we want to get ahead of it.
So that is one major thing that's coming up. I don't know whether 10 years or however it will be. Are there any other big challenges that are coming up in the future or the near future that you can predict that are coming apart from that one?
Yeah, the big one back to AI is the more and more deep fakes that are so credible that it becomes very, very hard to detect that they are actually fake. And when I say deep fake, it's like the two of us talking, and I don't know if you're an AI or not an AI. That level of deepfake, and it's getting there. Like you can see, I don't know if you've heard about the story about the North Korean workers in the US, but there are like hundreds and hundreds of North Korean workers that passed through AI as real workers and were able to infiltrate a lot of US companies. There's been scam on WhatsApp. It's crazy what's happening today, and I think that's not going to get better. So and we don't have the solutions today because, of course, AI, I mean, like all technology, usually the offense is ahead of the defense. So yeah, we need to find solutions for that. And by the way, in some cases, like in identity, I don't think AI is the solution to AI. We need to go back to the root cause of why we have a problem and why we have an attack vector. I was talking about phishing. The root cause of phishing is passwords and weak passwords. So we need to get rid of passwords to get rid of that vector of attack. We may have other vector of attacks in the future, but at least let's get rid of this one and we'll be better.
So we were talking a little bit about people and maybe some of the ignorance or maybe just not having the savvy enough to know what to do to protect their identity. Do you think that's like a generation issue? Do you think in the future people will be more savvy? Or do you think that there's always going to be that percentage of the population who are, for a French word, laissez-faire or blasé about protecting their identity?
I think there's definitely something around the education here. And I'm happy to see that in schools today, you start being educated about the internet, the risks of the internet and digital identity and so on. So that's starting. I have 3 kids and I can see that coming through the school curriculum. At the same time, it's it's a bit of a funny story because they try to educate, but at the same time, inside the school, like all the kids have the same Chromebook with the same password. So it's a bit of a, okay, let's act as we preach. But at least it's good education, and in time, I think it's going to get better. Will we have people that are still lazy and still don't pay attention? Sure, the same way like another metaphor is the seat belt in cars. For a very long time, nobody was wearing seatbelt in cars, and then it was mandatory to have a seatbelt in the car, and we start educating generation to wear seatbelts, and hopefully most people today wear seatbelts in cars. So I think it's going to be the same type of transition where it's going to become obvious that you need to have a strong password or strong identity mechanisms in the digital world. I'm hopeful, let's say.
And in terms of like the market, it is a crowded market. Like, how do you differentiate your company from other identity protection providers?
Yeah, indeed. I mean, there's a lot of different solutions out there. So you have on the consumer side, the big tech like Apple and Google have their own solutions. In the enterprise world, you have the SSO solution, the single sign-on solution that are supposed to centralize your most critical systems. And then you have in my field the credential managers that are like doing essentially all the rest, like all the passwords, all the authentication mechanisms that are not covered by single sign-on. So it's a crowded market. It's interesting to see that we're starting to diverge a bit into how we approach the challenge. In the case of Dashlane, for instance, compared to some of our competitors have decided to go more in a vertical way along the tech stack of the IT admin. So you protect passwords, and then you protect secrets, you protect privilege access management, you protect the devices, and so on. And that's very much in the IT admin tech stack. And of course, there's a lot to be done there for sure. In our case, we're smaller and we try to innovate in a different way. So our own take on this is we're so far away from having full adoption of a credential manager across an organization. Let's try to fix that. Let's have, even if you're not an active user of password manager because you're lazy or for whatever reason, let's try and show you that you're doing the wrong thing, and let's try to educate you about what should be done. So as an example, these days, if you deploy the Dashlane extension on all the browsers inside the organization, if one of your employees types a weak password or a compromised password manually in the login form, we'll tell them, oh, by the way, you did something wrong. That password is compromised. You should either use Dashlane to generate a unique password, or you should at least change it. And we'll alert also your security team or your IT team. And that's a way for us to educate in context and try to provide protection, whether you're really active or not with the tool.
Could I ask a question in terms of like future protection? And maybe this is a foolish question, but what biometric data, is that something that could help protect people in the future? I know that I've opened accounts online and I use my facial recognition. You did talk about deepfake. What about things like fingerprint data? What about things like, I know, if I see films like optics, you see that on spy films quite often. Is that something that potentially could happen in the future? Or is that a bit too fantasy?
No, I think it's already happening. But in reality, biometrics is more of a convenience factor than a security factor. It's a way for you to verify who you are in a convenient way, but it's not a secure way. Because to your point, like fingerprint database have been stolen in the past, and once that happens, well, what do you do? Like, you're not going to change your fingerprints. We know that there have been proof of concept saying that, okay, with a well-printed paper, you can actually fake a face recognition. And that's not going to improve with AI, to your point. So I think we should still leverage biometrics for the convenience factor they are, or for the additional factors that it is. But you do need like a real security behind the scene. Whether it's, by the way, actually a password it can be a secure factor if it's not alone and if it's a complex and everything. But so that's what we do with passkeys. So for passkeys in general, what happens is that you will still have a verification factor using biometrics or some form of who you are to verify it's you before that exchange of identity happens behind the scene.
And just one final question about you and your company, and then we'll just move on a little bit to your personal experiences. How do you keep up to date with like the latest developments? Because it's changing so rapidly. How do you keep up to date all the time?
Well, it's very hard. It's a mix of reading online the news and what's happening in my industry and in the market. It's also about networking and attending events. So I was at a Wall Street Journal event on Tuesday, which was very interesting in the world of cybersecurity. And it's not directly applicable to my day to day and my business, but it's important to have that context. That's also why, like I mentioned, I'm organizing that security summit with a few speakers on April 1st, because that's a way for me to keep learning from others and to share that knowledge with others. And we need to all learn together. Like it's really like sharing the knowledge and sharing the expertise that gets us all better. But it's hard. It's very hard to keep up, especially with the pace of innovation these days.
So you come across as a very like passionate and high energy person. Is it easy to stay high energy and passionate about things, especially like if things are going like downhill or not going the way that you wanted? How do you keep like so focused and motivated?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I guess there's a bit of experience. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years or so, and there's been ups and downs in my career at different point in time. And you need to adapt. You need to accept that the bad moments will become better. It's always a new challenge. If I think about Dashlane, we had a lot of growth moments, but we also had a lot of reduction moments in a sense where we were actually reducing the headcount and trying to be more focused and so on. So those are different types of challenges. They're still challenges. So as a leader, it's always interesting to try and tackle those. They require different solutions. They require different sort of resiliency, let's say. But yeah, then at the end of the day, I think it's also a question of personality. Like I'm more of a glass half full person. So I always try to find the good in the dark moments. So
So
and I
speaking
like to
about you,
say also when you're really down, I also like to say to my colleagues or the people around myself that I'm fortunate not to be a surgeon. I'm fortunate not to be a soldier on the war field. I'm not. If I mess up, I'm not killing people. So there's way more complicated jobs than the one I have.
so you mentioned like if you mess up or when you mess up, what has been the most like unexpected challenge for you in your career?
I don't think if it's unexpected, but I think the biggest challenge I've always had is the people challenge, especially in a role where you are managing a large group of people in your teams and so on. The human aspect is always the hardest. Like okay, when I've had to hire, when I've had to fire, when I've had to challenge people for performance and so on. There are times when it goes well, and there are times when it's harder. And when there are like especially people crisis, let's call it like this, we tend to always act too slow or too late, and that's always hard. So I think that's the sort of the recurring difficulty I think you have as a leader or as a manager, and something you learn to get better at, but I don't think you can ever get perfect.
And what is the most surprising aspect of yourself that you've discovered through your career?
I think, interestingly, the fact that we're speaking together is probably one of those. I'm more of an introvert by nature. I'm very happy being alone and reading my book in my corner. And I think if you were looking at me when I was in primary school, I was more like the type that was sitting in one angle of the courtyard and reading their book on their own. And I was very fine like this. But of course, in our roles, you need to socialize. You need to talk to people. You need to be a bit more extrovert, and you need to have speaking skills. I tend to speak too fast, which is one thing I just shared with you before we went online. So that's something I've had to work on. I had to train myself. I had to think about proactively, and then you get used to it. So it's fine. Like I was at a Boston CISO dinner a few weeks back, and so I get dumped into a dinner with 40 people around me where you need to socialize, and there's a point of the event. I'm out of my comfort zone, but I do it, and then and it's fine.
Well, you wear the mask of an extrovert very well. I'm definitely
Okay.
surprised to hear you say that. The final question, just as we're coming towards the end, unfortunately, is if someone's watching this, maybe they're an entrepreneur and they have some doubts about whether they want to do something or not. For your experience, what advice would you give someone who is in that early stage and maybe thinking like, how do I go about this?
I think the biggest advice is you're not alone. Don't try to solve everything on your own. You have a lot of people around you in your support network, but get out there, get help, get advice, get support from others. Feel free to reach out to people that feel relevant to what you're doing so that they can share their knowledge and their expertise. Proactively find advisors to help you grow. Of course, if you have a multiple experience doing it, then maybe you don't need it. But I see too often founders and entrepreneurs that are trying to solve everything by themselves, and they kind of burn themselves out doing that. No, you're not alone. Like, get help from out there. It's really the community is nice. The community is happy to help you. So do it.
There you go. Amazing advice given there from Frédéric. Listen, I just want to thank you so much again for taking time to talk with us today. It's an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
That was Frédéric Rivain, CTO at Dashlane.